thank you so much, Enrique, for joining us for this new episode of Xobin Talks. I'm really excited to have you on this particular show. Uh, Before we get started, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us more about you so that we can understand your journey.
Thank you, Amrit. Thank you so much for having me. And I am excited to be here and the conversation that we are going to have. My name is Enrique Rubio. I am the founder of a global community called Hacking HR and the head of global community for an ecosystem called Transform, working on all things future of work and transformation of work in the workplace. A little bit of my journey. I started my career as an electronic engineer and worked many years as an engineer, and then I switched to HR. Mm-hmm. And it was I think it was a decision driven by both the circumstances, but also because I wanted to explore something different, which I think is, fits very well into the context of entrepreneurship. And I guess we're going to be talking about that. But I wanted to do something different. And I worked for a little bit in sales, and I realized I don't want to do sales. I want to work with people, but I don't want to do sales. And then I found HR, and I got hooked. So here I am, more than, I think, 12 years later now, and still in HR, building communities and bringing people together and trying to design and create and build an HR that is more in line with the new times and the new requirements and demands of the workforce, the workplace, business, the environment that we need. So that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Oh, let's double down on the last part that you were saying, that you are currently helping HRs in the new line of business, the way business is currently being treated. How has the HR function really changed in your opinion? And what are the top 2 or top 3 things that you're telling members of your community that this is what you need to do to stay ahead of the game?
Yeah, but that's a very interesting question. And, for a very long time, HR was considered a cost center, meaning
True.
the necessary evil that you needed in your company to run transactions, to hire, fire, pay people, and have some policies in place, right? Mm-hmm. And this was true for a very, very long time. And in fact, the first time that the concept of HR came to exist, which actually was called personal management, was about in the 1920s, when companies started to grow and the manufacturing sector started to grow, and they realized, we need some special function managing this. So for a very long time, it was true for HR that was all they did, hiring, firing, paying, and ensuring compliance. Mm-hmm. And it's only been in the past, maybe, if I stretch it, it may be that only in the past 20 years, companies realized that HR had more potential, more possibilities. It was much more than that. This was not true for all companies, but it was true for some companies that decided we want more out of our HR function. And particularly over the past 10 to 15 years, HR has been on a journey of mindset transformation, but also demands from business leaders and their organizations and their people, asking them to not just be that administrator of processes, that transactional function, but to be much more than that. So it's been difficult to change the mindset of HR as a function, because we were so used to doing something in one way. And only recently, 10 plus years, we've been asking HR to do things in a different way, in a significantly different way. So it's like, imagine if you try to go to the gym, today, after, 25 years not going right. You can't lift a heavy weight. You won't be able to run too long. You won't be able to do exercises for too long, because your muscles are atrophied perhaps, and you're going to get tired easily, and you won't be able to do it. It's going to hurt if you try to do it. Same thing happened with HR. The muscle of change transformation was a little atrophied because nobody ever asked us to be innovative. Nobody ever asked us to do more than what we were doing before, but now they do. So now we got to go to that gym. It's a mental gym, it's a learning gym. We got to go to the gym and we got to train a muscle that for a long time was just doing the bare minimum that was required from us. So that's been a little bit of the journey, right? There are people who are spearheading the movement of HR transformation, people that really believe and have believed for a long time in the power of HR, but still for a large group of people, HR continues to be, whether because they want it that way or whether because their leaders don't see their potential yet, HR continues to be that transactional function. So it's taking some time to bring HR in line with the new demands of this new reality, right? When I talk to people in HR, you asked me before, what are the top 2 or 3 things that I tell them is, the first thing that I tell them is you have to remove your HR hat and think as a business leader who happens to work in HR. If I was building a community for IT people, what I would tell them is make sure that you're always wearing the business hat, and from an IT perspective. If you were in sales, make sure that you're wearing your business hat from a sales perspective. I tell the same thing to HR folks, right? And this is way more important for HR because sales, IT, marketing, finance, they already went through their own transformations years ago. So the transformations they went through years ago, now we're going through some of that transformation ourselves, right, in HR. So I tell HR people, number 1, put on the business hat and think as a business leader who happens to work in HR. So that's number 1. And we can talk about how we operationalize that, right? So that's number 1. The second thing that I tell them, very closely related to the first one, is you have to learn things that are outside of HR, outside of traditional HR, that impact both the work that you do within HR, but also the impact that you make as an HR professional in the rest of the business. So let me give you one example of this. If you are trying to serve your business and you're trying to make sure that your business succeeds with people solutions, you have to understand really well what your business is all about, what the priorities are, what the goals are. And very often we don't understand that. Very often we don't even know what the goals are. So you got to go out there and learn. First of all, if you talk to the person in finance, you may need to learn some P&L, for example. You may need to learn some, the reading of financial metrics. You may need to learn how they envision the realization of those metrics. That doesn't mean that you are becoming less of an HR professional and more of a finance person. We're not asking HR people to become finance experts. We're asking them to have a minimum understanding of those functions and how HR impacts that and vice versa. So those are perhaps the 2 biggest things that I generally tell them.
It's interesting that you said that, because I speak to a lot of CEOs for whom HRs work. And I ask them that, what is your opinion about the HRs? Because everybody keeps saying this, HR is a cost function. So I try to cross question them saying that, okay, why do you say HR is a cross function or is a cost function? What can we do to do that, to change that? And here is what the CEOs tell me. And they tell me that my HRs are always reactive in nature. After they look at trailing parameters after things have happened and they react to things. Okay, someone is leaving the company, they'll conduct an exit interview. If the attrition rate is low for 2 quarters, they will try to do something to improve that. I want my HRs to be proactive rather than being reactive. I don't care whether it's a cost center or a revenue center. So how are you telling your community to be proactive, and what kind of training does an HR need to become more proactive in nature?
Yeah. Oh, that's a very good question. And what those CEOs are telling you is right on the money, because I hear the same thing, right? They tell me, among many things that they tell me about HR, one of them is, I would love for HR to be more proactive. I would want them to be more innovative. But I'm going to go back to something that I said before, right? The innovation mindset. This proactive mindset in HR has either been atrophied or never developed in the past, because we never asked HR to do this. So that doesn't mean that we should be irresponsible and say, nobody invested in me and therefore I decided to never learn. that would be a very irresponsible position to assume, right? And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. The first thing is that what leaders are asking from HR today, they never asked from HR in the past. So there's a transition that needs to happen, right? Because all the body of work, the body of knowledge, all the most of the competences developed for HR, most of the training models, most of the things that HR has talked about for a very long time were never designed for HR to be proactive or innovative or stay ahead of the curve, or all these things that those CEOs are complaining about. HR body of knowledge was created for something completely different, and that transition takes time. So so that's one thing, right? So there's a baseline that already has set us up for a little bit of failure, if you will, because our baseline is so far behind than anybody else's baseline that it's difficult to transition from that to the newer things that we're asking HR to do. But there are two other components. Component number one is that it's not enough for a CEO to say, I want you to be more proactive and do that on your own. You got to get people in it. You got to give them the chance. I always talk about this. Give them the chance. Give them the opportunity. Bring them to your high-level business conversations. Have them in there with you. Maybe they are going to be quiet for a little bit, right? Because they are learning things that maybe they didn't know about before, and that's okay. That's how we all start here, right? Give them the chance to show that they can actually be proactive, innovative, that they can add more transformational value to your company. But don't do this by keeping them on the sidelines. You got to get them involved in the processes, in the strategic decisions, in the strategic planning that is happening in the organization. So number one, or number two in this case, so we got that baseline that was far behind. Number two is CEOs, business leaders, give HR the chance to show you that we can actually be a revenue center and not a cost center. And we can do that by helping you solve your business challenges with people solutions that we know a lot about, by the way. Help us by including us in the conversation so that we can understand and learn what you're talking about. And then in our minds and in our work, we can connect the dots between that and the work that we do in HR. So that is the second thing. And the third thing that I want to say here is that's having a CEO that tells you, all right, I'm going to get you involved in everything that we do. For you to go to those meetings and never say anything, never learn anything, never add any value, then this last message is for HR. You have to change your mindset. You have to get used to the fact that what you did in the past is not enough anymore. Maybe you're still doing it. I mean, I'm sure that many HR people are still running transactions, hiring, firing, paying, doing compensation and compliance. You probably will still to do that. We'll have to do that going forward, but that's not enough anymore from HR. So you have to change your mindset. If you're invited, if you're given that power to be part of these high-level conversations, you must understand that the bare minimum, the transactional HR, the administrator of processes, that kind of HR is not enough anymore. You are going to have to go way ahead of that, way beyond that. And that's on you, HR. That's why I said before, put on the business hat and think as a business leader who happens to work in HR. And number two, learn things that don't fall within the normal parameters, the traditional parameters of HR, but impact the job that you do. For that to happen, every HR person will have to decide and make the determination that this is true, that they can add much more value than just the bare transactional minimum, and that even if they don't know how to do it, they can learn how to do it. And that's a big distinction, right? One thing is coming to those meetings and saying, it's my first time here. Honestly, guys, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just learning. I came to this meeting first. I'm going to take all this knowledge. I'm going to go back, learn from it, connect the dots with the work that I do in HR. And next meeting, I'm sure that I'm going to be bringing extra ideas, insights, values from the people perspective to the business challenges that we're dealing with. But you have to make the determination as an HR professional. You have to make that decision. If you don't make that decision, you're going to be invited to the meeting, and one day they're going to realize these guys are not adding any value here, so we're not going to invite them anymore. So that to me is the bottom line on how to resolve that question of creating a more proactive, innovative, transformational kind of HR.
That mindset shift is extremely hard because you're trained for compliance, and compliance is all about following rules. Going on the other end of the spectrum to innovation, where you're breaking rules.
Yeah, well,
That's
that's what we were.
completely different.
Yeah, and we were asked to do that. I mean, if you think about it, it's like for 100 years we were asked to do compliance, meaning follow rules. And then literally overnight, we're like, all right, don't follow the rules anymore, or don't think just about following the rules anymore. Now be innovative, be proactive. And it's like asking a lawyer, for 100 years, write the laws. And then when they're telling them, teach us how to break the laws. You're like, wait a second, like for a long time, I was just trying to make sure that everybody was following the laws. And now you're asking me to tell people how to break the laws, right? And that's not what we're doing in HR, by the way. We're not telling people how to break the laws. But, as a function for a long time, it was just about compliance. Mostly it was about that. Hiring, firing, and compliance. It was all about that. Yeah. And then literally overnight in the history of HR, because this has happened overnight in the past 10 years, which is just 10% of the life of HR, we're asking HR to be more innovative, more proactive. These things don't happen overnight, let alone if we don't have the support from our CEOs from the perspective of including us in those conversations, but also giving us the resources for us to be able to do more, learn more, and be more involved in these kinds of conversations. So absolutely agree with you in that spectrum, right? We've been from one end to the other, and some people expect us to do that alone, and we can't do it alone. We can't.
Yeah. I like your journey, and that's something that we want to talk about, because you started off as an electronics engineer, and then you moved into a project engineering role. From there, you came into HR field, and in HR field also you've grown. So you've yourself been an intrapreneur and an entrepreneur both. So I wanted to understand, how did you decide? What was your journey as an entrepreneur? What kind of support did you get? What kind of outcomes happened through that? If you could walk us through your journey, I think that would motivate a lot of other people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like I said before, yes, I started as an electronic engineer. And this is what happened to me, actually. I have this, and I'm sure that a lot of people have it in them, right? And not everybody does, but I do, and I know many that do as well. I have this thing in me that I tend to get bored, not quickly, but quicker than a lot of people, right? And what happens is that if I'm doing something and it's the same thing day in and day out for a long time, I disconnect from that thing and I start looking to do something else. And what happened to me when I was, 20 years ago, when I was working as an electronic engineer, or 18 years ago, I was in this company and I was doing the same thing day in and day out. And I realized, man, I'm so bored. I mastered the skills that are needed to do this job, but there's nowhere else to go in the company. There's nowhere else to grow. Small company, right? So then I decided to do my own thing, besides, aside of the company. So I still had that job, but I was doing something else. The president of the company found out, this was many years ago, by the way, the president of the company found out, he got really upset at me and he fired me. And the person in HR was my friend. And I told her, I never forget it, coming into her office and asking her, like, what happened? I mean, first of all, this is illegal. I'm not doing anything wrong against the company. But second, why are you not saying anything? First of all, you're HR. And second of all, you're my friend. And well, they couldn't do anything and things ended the way they ended. And that was a motivator to me to enter into HR, because I was like, I can't believe that HR is like this. And I am a very outspoken, extroverted, speak up kind of guy. And I did spoke up against, not against, but with the president. I said, like, you're doing something wrong. I mean, it's, you're losing out on great talent in me, by letting me go for this ridiculous reason. But then that's how I got into HR, right? It was a little bit of me wanting to explore more the people function, but also it was accelerated by that situation that happened to me. But the point, and then in the next journey in my career, something very similar happened. I was in this job for a very long time. And 3 years into the job, I was like, shoot, man, I am so bored. I need to do something else. And it's funny because this is what happened. I just couldn't move to another company for the time being, because I had some responsibilities and I needed to stay there. Then I created a couple of things inside the company, and I didn't ask permission from my boss, from anybody, to do those things. And one of them was like I wanted to do like a TED Talk kind of thing inside the company. And I talked to the people in TED Talk, and they said, no, we can't go there. And I said, well, I'm going to invent my own thing inside the company. And when I didn't ask permission from anybody, when I put it together for the first time, my boss got really upset at me, by the way.
Okay.
She was like, why are you doing this? This is not your job. You're not asking permission from anybody. It was an innovation conversation, by the way. And I actually told her, I mean, it's funny that we talk about innovation in this company and you're not letting me do something that is like, outside of my, kind of like my job, right? I mean, you're pretty much, quashing my.
They're boxing you into a particular job role and not allowing you to do anything else.
Yeah, exactly. And I didn't want that. And I told her, like, well, if you want me to cancel this thing, you're going to have to talk to everybody who registered to the first conversations that we were going to have, which were like 250 people. You're going to have to talk to all of them and say that you are the one asking me to cancel, not me. And she said, like, no, you do your own thing. But the bottom line for me here is that there are people who have this spirit where they tend to get bored quickly. And there's a lot of them. They want to do something else. They get disengaged with job. They get bored with what they're doing. If what they're doing is the same thing every day, day in and day out, and there's no extra challenge from an intellectual, from a curiosity, from a mental, from a skills perspective. So an intrapreneur is very often that person who wants to do something that creates value. But I'm not sure about this, by the way, because I don't even know if there's a lot of science about entrepreneurs. I'm not sure that all entrepreneurs are driven just to create value for the company they work on. I don't think their main idea is, how do I do something that makes more money for the shareholders of this company? I think what drives them is, I am so bored and I need to do something else. But because they are paying me to be here, maybe I do something that makes sense for me, to help me grow, that challenges me, but also something that helps this company in the long run. And I think that's the ultimate sort of idea of entrepreneurs. I'm not saying that some of them are not driven by creating value to the company and that's their only sort of ambition, but you got to have something else in you. That just can't be the only reason, because otherwise you're going to get bored really quickly if you're not realizing that value in the short term. So what keeps you going as an entrepreneur, and what's kept me going, is this idea that I need to be learning. I am curious. I need to, I work fast. I'm thinking fast. You can tell I speak fast, and I need to be challenged, right? And there's science about this. Like Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, he wrote the book Flow, which if your listeners have not read, it's one of the most fascinating books ever. And he talked about flow. He said, when you are doing something that you're so passionate about, you enter into a state of flow, which is pretty much a state in which you are so focused on what you're doing that the entire world disappears because you're so focused on that. So that's number one. And then there's another theory written by a psychologist named David Sanford. And he wrote this theory for high school students, but then it's been used for everything else. It's the theory of support and challenge. Basically, what he says is that if you support people too much in what they have to do, they will tend to get bored quickly or disengaged because they will think that what they have to do is easy. If you challenge them too much, they will get overwhelmed. They will get anxious because they won't be able to resolve what you're asking them to do. There's got to be a right level of support and balance. So combining that with flow, entrepreneurs are trying to find the right level of support from their leaders, the right level of challenge, but they want to be on a state of flow. They want to be on a state where they are doing something that really, really hooks them up. And most organizations are not designed for that. Most organizations are designed to hire somebody, get them learning to do something for, 6 months, get them doing that thing forever, and that's it. When you go to a learning program, the learning program is to do something incrementally different than what you were doing before, but that those increments are not enough to get somebody's attention or to get somebody hook up into doing something. So that's what happens with that entrepreneurs, and that's been, I think, the norm in my journey. Trying to find things that keep me challenged, that keep me motivated, that keep me inspired, keep me curious and intellectually motivated. because the moment I'm doing something that I'm like, all right, I've been doing this for too long and I already know how to do it very well, I just get bored. And I think this is true for a lot of entrepreneurs.
True.
Sorry, that was a very long answer.
It is true for a lot of people. You can't just say that, okay, they have attention deficit disorder. It's not that. It is,
No.
I want to be challenged. I
Yeah.
want to learn something continuously. I can't do something,
Yeah.
the same thing over and over again. I'm not a machine.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think, yes, that kind of resonates with me as well. But then
Yeah.
how did you make that jump from an entrepreneur, basically doing something inside a company, to an entrepreneur, which is
Yeah.
starting something on your own? How is that shift?
Yeah. Well, it's the same rationale that I explained before, right? I mean, you want to be challenged, you want to be motivated, but then there's a limit of what you can do inside a company, right? And you reach a point where you're like, there's no way that I can continue doing this inside this company, because the conditions in the company are not proper for you to be doing that. Maybe you're getting pretty much punished, which I did. It happened to me. You get punished for trying to do something different, more innovatively, more creatively, for doing something that is not in the box of your job. And then you find out, man, I'm tired of this. I'm tired. No, I'm not tired of doing the thing. I'm tired of having to battle the people that don't like that I'm doing the thing or the things that I want to do in addition to my job. It's not that I'm not doing my job. I'm doing my job fairly well, pretty well. I'm a top performer in the company, but I'm getting all these, negative reactions and punishment from my leaders telling me you're not supposed to do that. You gotta do this, blah blah blah. And then you reach a point where that's how I did the jump, right? Or the leap. When you reach that point, that stage, you're like, there's nothing else that I can do here that will allow me to do what I want to do, will allow me to express this kind of mindset and curiosity and need for challenge. And I'm getting so much bashing from the company that I have to do something else. That happened to me, and that's happened to a lot of people, by the way.
Yeah.
It's happened to a lot of people that they have their job and they do it pretty well, and maybe they are very innovative within the confines of their job, but still, even then, they find that their ideas are not considered or valued, and they find that they want to do more, they want to engage with more people, and they are not allowed to do so, or they are not given the opportunities to do so. And then they realize, what? Forget about this. I need to do something else. And you can go back in history, and you will find so many stories. You find the story of recent stories, like, for example, WhatsApp. WhatsApp, this was an employee of Facebook, and the guy created something, and the guy said, look what I created. This is so cool. And the people in Facebook were like, we're an innovative company, but this is not that innovative. We don't care about this. The guy left, takes his product with him, comes back, a few years later, selling it for $20 billion to the very company that could have taken it, as their product. If they had listened to this guy, they could have saved $20 billion. If they had given this guy the opportunity to show and to, work on this, right? I remember, one time I interviewed this guy. His name is Steven Sasson. Steven Sasson, I don't know if you know who he is, but Steven Sasson, he invented the digital camera, and he was working in Kodak. This was in 1975. Kodak was not only one of the most innovative and successful companies in the world. Their market share of film photography was something around the lines of like 90%. So meaning they were, pretty much a monopoly.
Yeah.
And he came up with this thing, and he goes to his business leaders and he says, look what I invented, and this thing may disrupt the business of film photography in the next, 10 years or so. The guys told him, well, we don't think that's going to happen. But, we're going to give you some permission to do the work on this, but I don't think we're going to happen. So we're not going to change. So we just listen to you a little bit we listen to you enough to patent the technology of digital photography, which they did, but not enough to give you the chance to explore this as a full business line. What happened, 25, 30 years later, Kodak bankrupt. Digital photography is king today. Only vintage people use film photography anymore. So, when you don't find those outlets, you just have to leave, and because otherwise you're going to be very uncomfortable, very depressed. You're going to be very frustrated every day. I remember myself, going to work being frustrated of, I want to do something different, but I can't do it in here. They are not giving me this chance, so I gotta leave, and that's why I left.
It's interesting you say that, because of late, over the past 6 to 7 years, we've seen companies starting an innovation center inside the company.
Yeah.
I have strong opinions that nothing really good has come out of these innovation centers. I mean, you've had banks setting up their innovation centers. You've got technology firms where there is an innovation center under the CTO or the CEO. I've not really seen anything really come out of those innovation centers. And the surprising aspect is the attrition rate in those innovation centers is really high. People quit those innovation centers and quit the company within let's say a year. At least 30-40% of the smart folks who join the innovation center quit the company. What are your thoughts on that?
But not only that, think about this. What do they do when they quit those companies? They don't go to find another job. They go to create their own companies with the thinking, the ideas that they wanted to develop in the first place in those innovation centers that they were never allowed to do. So they go out and they say, I wanted to do this. I did it. I got my work done, and I was never allowed to, explore this as a business opportunity. And maybe they are so fixated with an idea they think that can be successful, but the business where they work doesn't believe so, that they leave those companies and they go to create their own thing. Some of them do fail, but I'm gonna say something really weird here, but they successfully fail, meaning they still build enough of a credibility to say, I try to build a product, it worked, but it didn't work enough, to make it to the market or whatever, right? And then they go to find another job, probably at a much higher level than they were before. But some of them end up being very successful because they invent things that they wanted to invent for their previous workplaces in their innovation centers or whatever it was. So this is what happens, and I think some people have talked about this, and I think it's in the innovator's dilemma, and I think it's also I'm just trying to remember a couple of books what I've read, exponential organizations, where they have looked into companies that they know, these companies know that their structures are so traditional that it's impossible for an innovation center to actually work within those companies. Okay. So what they end up doing is they have to create sort of a spin-off of that organization with its own structure, its own management style, its own leadership style, its own hierarchy, whatever it is, because they know that it's impossible for those things to work inside those organizations. So this is what happens. Not all companies can do that, by the way. Not all companies can say, I'm going to create an innovation center, and of all the cool ideas that are happening in here, maybe I'm going to create another company for them to, and I'm going to put, 100 million in that company to, for them to innovate. Not all the companies can do this. But what they can do is that if they talk about innovation, creativity, experimentation, entrepreneurship, you have to build the culture, you have to build the structures, you have to build the leadership competences and the leadership style to be able to, number one, give people the opportunity to actually do what you're asking them to do. Meaning, if you're asking them to be innovative, creative, to take risk, to experiment, you're going to have to be okay with the idea that 99.9% of all the things they're going to do will fail. Yeah. And that's okay. If you really are in that mindset. You will also have to acknowledge that some ideas will not work, but, maybe you will have to find the right way to face sort of those situations, right? But simultaneously, you're going to have to also give people the chance to have leadership support, the support of the organization when they are creating something, when they are innovating, when they are experimenting, because not everything fails because it is meant to fail. Some things fail because they don't get the support they need from the people who may add extra value to that idea, for that idea to work. And so you got to have the right culture. You have to have the right competencies and behaviors, the right leadership style for ideas to actually work. So it doesn't matter if you have an innovation center, your leaders don't like giving people credit because then it's not going to work. It doesn't matter if you have an innovation center when, direct managers punish people for failing when they do something. You won't be able to be innovative or to build an innovation center if you're forcing people to come back to the freaking office. I mean, even small things like that, right? I mean, some people like myself, I'm a competitive runner. So it's funny because generally when I'm in my home office, I am working, typing away, sending emails, having calls and blah, blah. So I don't have enough time to think or enough time to create. So it is when I go out running that I'm not listening to anything. I'm just in nature. This is a big forest where I live. So I go out and I start thinking and I start creating in my mind. And then I come back to the office and I write down, literally, I have my notes over there where I write down all the things that I thought about that I may want to do or not at all, but at least I thought about them. So imagine Amrit, that you were my leader, a traditional leader. And I come to you and I say, Amrit, I need to go out for a 2-hour run because I need to think and create. Imagine what traditional leaders would say to that. They would say, like, are you freaking kidding me?
Yeah.
I mean, go back to your desk and get your work done. I mean, forget about, thinking or creating. Now, if I told you that in those 2 hours of daily run, I have all these ideas and I come back to you and I say, I had all these ideas while I was running, you have to be very open-minded to believe that that's true, because only then will you tell me, go to, Enrique, do you go for your 2-hour run? Because every time that you go for a run, you come back with all these ideas, man, that are awesome, right? But you have to be very open to that. And we are so stuck in stupid conversations about whether people come back to the office or stay working remotely. Who the hell cares about that? If people are working remotely and they take a 2-hour run outside and they are creating something incredible in those 2 hours rather than the 8 hours a day they are sitting in the desk, what the heck? Just give them the chance. But you just have to be open. Your organization has to be ready for that. You have to have the right culture. So even if you have an innovation center and you're telling people, don't go to that 2-hour work, stay in your desk and do your work, that's not going to work. That's not going to produce anything successful. So you have to be very open. You have to have the right culture for these things to actually emerge and grow and succeed.
Okay. You, in your entrepreneurial journey, you built an AI-based recruitment platform, and it's like ages ago. Of course, a lot of things have changed right now. But if you had a chance to do things differently, what would you do based on the new AI which is there right now? How would you do your AI-based recruitment platform today, different from what you did previously?
Yeah, well, ChatGPT, I mean, this version of ChatGPT only came out, I think it was at the end of last year or the beginning of this year. I mean, ChatGPT existed before, but not in a user-friendly form like we have right now, right? And so we didn't rely on that kind of AI. For us, it was more, basic level of machine learning. So I would definitely, right now, I use ChatGPT every day for pretty much everything that I do, literally every day. For all my write-ups, even if it's an email, sometimes I want to send an email and I am very informal in my writing. And maybe if I want to send a more formal email, I go to ChatGPT and I say, can you please help me out, sort of move this from a informal, write-up to a more formal write-up. And, I don't agree with everything it says, right? But it does, guide me in the proper way. I think I would rely more on ChatGPT. I think I would make sure that I am using and leveraging on ChatGPT because it's really powerful. But more importantly, from a business perspective, what happened with that company is that I thought that people had a problem that actually either they didn't have or they had, but they didn't care about.
Okay.
And I created a product for something that, people didn't need. And that's something that ends up happening with entrepreneurs very often, right? You create something that nobody wants or nobody needs, or maybe they don't need at that moment. It's not the right time. I don't know if you know the story of Post-its. Post-its were created by a company, by this engineer in 3M. I can't remember his name. So the guy, he made a mistake with some glue. He created the Post-it notes and he showed it to everybody, and everybody was like, that's freaking boring. Forget about that. So like 10 years later, somebody else was like, what is this Post-it notes kind of thing. He picked it up, he changed a couple of things like the colors, and he showed it again to the company, and everybody was like, whoa, this is the best thing ever. And it became, Post-it notes are like a massive thing right now all over the world.
Yeah.
But when it was invented for the first time, it was not its time. So some ideas definitely don't work. Some ideas may work, but they don't have the right market. And some other ideas are good, but they are not at the right time. Yeah. So I think that's what happened to my idea, but I definitely would rely more on ChatGPT right now. I would build something that it feeds both from our internal knowledge base, which is ultimately what ChatGPT would do. It feeds on your internal database, but also on its own database, and it produces very comprehensive responses or solutions to what people are looking for.
What is your opinion on what's happening right now in the HR tech space? Because we've got applications like time tracking softwares, which basically are intruding into your workers' privacy. You've got so many such softwares which the management wants, but the actual users of the company don't really like it. You've got chatbots which chat with people as though it is an HR, but it's basically just a chatbot. Yeah. These fancy little applications are there in the space of HR. They are being bought, but not everybody likes them. I have very, very strong opinions on that, but I'd like to hear from your end. Do you think they're any good?
I think some of them are good, and I think some of them are not good. And so, for example, right now you have technology that monitors whether people are working or not. By the clicking of your key, the typing on your keyword or the moving of the mouse. I think that is the most absurd thing that has ever happened in management. And what's funny is that you hear this from companies that call themselves innovative, right? Yeah. They, you talk about, what's all the things that are going on with Elon Musk and his companies, the most innovative guy in the world, but he's trying to see whether people are coming to the office and how long they're working. And he's even looking at the badge screening through the door versus the number of hours that people are inside the company. That is stupid. That is the stupidest thing, that probably has happened, in a long time. I don't think any of those technologies that are supposed to be monitoring people are doing any good to anybody, nor to the company, nor to the person. I mean, of course, as an employee, I wouldn't like it, but it doesn't do any good to the company because, well, what do? I just sit down in there and I'm typing away just to make you upset, because I don't, there's a moment in time that I don't give a damn anymore. If you're monitoring me, and then I cannot go for my 2-hour run outside to think and create, but I have to be typing away 8 hours a day, then that's what I'm going to do. So you're not going to really get you are not really getting my intellectual value and my talents. What you're getting from me is my physical movement of typing something in the computer, because that's what you're measuring. So stupid. So I don't agree with that kind of technology. But you mentioned the example of chatbots, right? So I recently had the opportunity to talk to an HR leader from a very large company, like 200,000 people. And it's impossible, this is from her words, but I also know this to be true. It is impossible for them, whenever they make a change on whatever policy that has to do with, say, PTO or compensation or whatever it is impossible for their HR team to respond to all the questions that are coming from all the people. Mm-hmm. Even if you have say that for 200,000 people, you have, 1,000 people in HR, maybe you have 100, person call center, but imagine if you have every day or every week, one question from every employee in the company. We're talking about 200,000 questions every week. That is just impossible for a 100 people team to resolve. So then you use ChatGPT, because some of those questions are not, they are not deep questions that require a human conversation. They are things that are so simple, like, hey, you changed the policy. I had 3 PTO days before. Mm-hmm. With the new policy, how many more days do I have? Or how many less days do I have, right? And it's a simple question that a machine can respond. So there are things that technology can do pretty well. And I definitely favor the use of technology that can make it easy to HR or easier for HR to run transactions or to run, this kind of administration of low-level kind of requests, right? But what I'm imagining is, and what I am hoping is that as you're doing that, you are freeing up time to have the real conversation. So now, for example, if you don't have to use that time to respond to 200,000 questions related to something that is written in the policy. So maybe now you start talking to people about mental health, well-being, employee experience, because you are using your time in a different, more valuable way. Yeah. So anyway, that's a long answer to say that I favor the use of technology that makes it easier for HR to run more efficient low-level transactions, with the ultimate goal of them freeing up some time to do the more important, the more human conversations that technology cannot have. And if there's any business leader who is by any chance thinking about bringing on board some of this stupid technology, like monitoring technology for the mouse or the keyboard, or having, I had this boss, and she had an office in one country and an office in another country. So I was working with her in the office here in the US, and she had a webcam on all the time, looking at the office in the other country. And I was like, what the hell are you doing? I mean, like, it's like the Big Brother. It's like 1984. Yeah. I mean, this is ridiculous, right? So don't do that. I mean, that's not going to give you, that's going to give you a sense of like, I'm the boss. I make these decisions, and my ego is satisfied because now I'm looking at everybody. But the question, if that's a question to you, then you shouldn't be a leader. If the question to you is this helping me create more value for the people and the company? The answer will always be no. So therefore, don't do it.
True. Now, before I let you go, I have a last question for you. And this is probably a bit lighter question. You've spent almost 20 years in the industry, and 12 of them have been in the HR space. If you were a student who was graduating today, what would you tell your younger self to be prepared for?
A very good question. I would tell both my younger self, but also the newer generations. Well, actually, I would tell my younger self, because I was born in a very different time, right, than today. I would say experiment with things. Don't get stuck with one idea. Be just open-minded. Be very open-minded. Experiment with new things. Some things will work. Some things won't work. You may get fired from one job. Another job may beg you to never leave them, and you will still leave them because you want to do something else. Just be open-minded. Just try new things. Experiment with new ideas, because things change, right? And what's relevant today may be obsolete tomorrow, and what doesn't make sense today may be the most valuable idea in the world tomorrow. So experiment with new ideas. Be open-minded. I don't even think we should tell this to the newer generations, because I think that's how they are wired right now, right? Yeah. I mean, you see the tenure of like Gen Z and Alpha Gen. Probably their tenure in any company will be a short tenure, especially if those companies call themselves innovative, but they never give them the chance. People will say, like, to hell with this. I'm going to go move on to the next thing, right? Or create my own thing. And if it doesn't work, well, I create the next one, or I reinvent myself over and over again. That's what I would tell me. I would tell me, be open-minded, experiment, and that ultimately will lead to an ongoing process of reinvention that will keep you excited, engaged. And, the last day of your life, you won't think, oh man, I wish I had done that, because you did it. And you can say, I did it. It didn't work. I have all these stories of things that never worked well, but I did them, and that to me is better than saying, oh, I regret not ever doing them, So that's the message, it's be open-minded, experiment, reinvent yourself.
Awesome. Be open-minded. I think that is something that our current generation is definitely going to look forward to. Yeah. Thank you, Enrique. Thank you so much for your time. This was really interesting. I loved hearing more about your journey, and I hope to talk to you very soon again.
Likewise. Thank you so much for your thoughtful questions, and I hope this was of value to your community.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.